Digger Smith by C.J. Dennis. Digger Smith. This is a Librivox recording. Recording by Son of the Exiles. Digger Smith by C.J. Dennis. Chapter 1. Before the War.
Before the war she sighs, before the war, then blinks her eyes and tries to work a smile. Old scenes, she says, don't look the same no more. Old ways, she says, seems to have changed their style. The pleasures that we had don't seem worth while, them simple joys that passed an hour away, and troubles that we used to so revile. How small they look, she says, how small today. This war, sighs old Ma Flood, and when I seen the old girl sittin' in our parlour there, tellin' her troubles to my wife Doreen, as though the talkin' eased her load of care, I thinks of mothers here and everywhere, smilin' a bit while they are grievin' sore for growin' up babies fightin' over there. And then I hears 'em sigh, before the war. My wife has took the social habit hard. I ain't averse, one more new word I've learned. Averse to tea when tea is to be had, and when it comes I reckon that it's earned. It's just a drink as far as I'm concerned, good for a bloke that's toilin' on the land. But when a caller comes, here I am turned into a social butterfly offhand. And drinkin' tea becomes an holy rite, so's I won't bring the family to disgrace. I gets a bit of coachin' overnight on ridin' winners in this bun-fed race. I have to change me shirt and wash me face, and look real neat from my waist up, at least, and sling remarks in at the proper place, and not make noises drinkin' like a beast. Have some more cake, another slice now do, and won't you have a second cup of tea? How is the children? Oh, it makes me blue. This boudoir habit ain't no good to me. I likes to take me tucker plain and free, tea and a chunk out on the job for choice, so I can stoke with no one there to see. Besides, I haven't got no company voice. Of course I've had it all out with the wife. I argues that there's work that must be done, and tells her that I hates this Tony life. She says there's duties that we must not shun. You bet that ends it, so I joins the fun, and puts 'em all at ease with silly grins, slings bits of repartee like have a bun, and passes bread and butter for me sins. Since I've been married, say I've chucked some things and learned a whole lot more to fill the space. I've slung all slang, crook words have taken wings, and I have learned to entertain with grace. But when old Mrs. Flood comes round our place, I don't object to her for all her size, because I likes her ways, I likes her face, and most of all she has them mother's eyes. Before the war, she sighs, the poor old girl. Her talk, it gets me thinkin' in between, while I'm assistin' at this social whirl. She comes across for comfort to Doreen, to talk about the things that might have been if Sid had not been killed at Suvla Bay, or Jim not done a bunk at 17 and not been heard of since he went away. They have a little farm right next to us, her and her husband, where they live alone. Spite of her cares, she ain't the sort to fuss or serve up sudden tears and sob and moan. And since I've known her, somehow I have grown to seein' her and all the griefs she's bore. A million brave old mothers who have known deep sorrow since them days before the war. Before the war, she says, you mind our Sid? Poor lad, but then you never met young Jim, him who was charged with things he never did. Both of ye had been real chums with him. High-spirited he was, a perfect limb. It's 6 long years now since he went away. I drove away, her poor old eyes get dim. That was, she sighs, that was me blackest day. Me blackest day? What am I sayin' now? There was the day the parson come to tell the news about our Sid, and yet somehow my little Jim, she pauses for a spell. Your Hollyoaks is doin' really well, she says, and battles hard to brighten up. And them there pinks of yours, how sweet they smell. Thanks, I think I will have one more cup. As far as I can get the strength of it, them floods have had a real tough row to hoe. First off, young Jim, who plays it high a bit, knocks the old man a treat and slings the show. Then come the war, and Sid, he has to go. He run his final up at Suvla Bay, one of the Aussies I was proud to know, and Jim's cracked 'earty since he went away. Jim, these mothers, Lord, they're all the same. I wonder if Doreen'll be that kind. Sid was the son who played the real man's game, but Jim, who sloped and left no word behind, his is the picture shinin' in her mind. High-spirited, I've heard that tale before. I sometimes think she'd take it rather kind to hear that his high spirits run to war. Before the war, she says, our times was good. The little farm out there, and just us four, workin' to make a decent livelihood. Our Sid and Jim, poor Jim, it grieves me sore, for Dad won't have him mentioned home no more. He's hurt, I know, 'cause he thinks Jim hurt me, as if he could, the bonny boy I bore. But I must off home now and get Dad's tea. I seen her to the gate, take it from me, I'm some polite. She says, you mustn't mind me talkin' so of Jim, but when I see your face, it brings him back. He's just your kind. Not quite so handsome, p'raps, nor so refined. I've got some toys of his, she says, but there, this is old woman's talk, and you behind, with all your work and little time to spare. She gives me hand a squeeze and turns away, sobbin', I thought, but when she looks behind, smilin' and wavin' like she felt real gay, I wonders how the women works that blind, and just waves back, then goes inside to find a lookin'-glass and takes a real good look. Not quite so handsome, p'raps, nor so refined. God help you, Jim, I thinks, you must be crook.
Chapter 2 of Digger Smith by C.J. Dennis. Dummy Bridge.
If I'd a played me jack on that there 10, says Peter Begg, I might have made the lot. How could you, barks old Poole, how could you when I had me queen behind, says Begg. What rot. I slung away me king to take that trick. Which one? Say, ain't your head a trifle thick? Now don't you see that when I plays me king, I give your queen a chance and lost the slam? But Poole, he says, he don't see no such thing. So Begg gets hot and starts to loose a dam. He twigs the missus just in time to check, and makes a dash and gets red down his neck. There's me and Peter Begg and old man Poole, neighbours of mine that farm a bit close by. Just once a week or so we makes a school and gives this game of dummy bridge a fly. Doreen, she has her sewin' by the fire. The kid's in bed, and is me heart's desire. Home comfort, peace, the picture of me wife. Happy at work, me neighbours gathered round. All friendly like, what more is there in life? I've searched a bit, but better I ain't found. Doreen, she seems content, but in her eye I've seen real pity when the talk gets high. This evening we had started off real hot. 2 little slams and Poole without a score, still lookin' sore about the cards he got, when sudden like a knock comes to the door. A visitor, growls Begg to cruel our game, and looks at me as though I was to blame. Just as Doreen goes out, I seen her grin. "Deal 'em up quick," I whispers, "grab your hand, and look real occupied when they comes in. Perhaps they'll have the sense to understand. If it's a man, maybe he'll make a 4, but if..." Then Mrs. Flood comes in the door. 'Twas old Ma Flood, her face wrapped in a smile. "Now, boys," she says, "don't let me spoil your game. I'll just chat with Doreen a little while. But if you stop, I'll be ashamed I came." And then she waves a letter in her hand. Says she, "Our Jim's a soldier, ain't it grand?" "Good boy," says Poole. "Let's see, I'll make it hearts." "Doubled," shouts Begg, "and he'd been in a fight," says Mrs. Flood, "out in them foreign parts. French, I s'pose, I can't pronounce it right. He's been once wounded somewhere in the leg." "Here, Bill, you gone to sleep?" asks Peter Begg. I plays me queen of spades and plays her bad. Begg snorts. "My boy," sighs Mrs. Flood, "my Jim." "King here," laughs Poole, "that's the last spade I had." Doreen, she smiles. "I'm glad you've heard from him." "We're done," groans Begg. "Why did you nurse your ace?" "My Jim," and there was sunlight in her face. "I always thought a lot of Jim might did," says Begg. "He does you credit. Here, your deal." "That's so," says Poole. "He was an all right kid. No trumps? I'm sorry that's the way you feel. 'Twill take you all your time to make the book." And then Doreen sends me a wireless look. I gets the SOS, but Begg is keen. My dearly yaps, what rotten cards I get. Old Mrs. Flood sits closer to Doreen. "The best," she whispers, "I ain't told you yet." I strains me ears and leads me king of trumps. "Ace here," grins Begg. Poole throws his queen and thumps. "That saves me, Jack," howls Begg. "Tough luck, old sport." Says Mrs. Flood, "Jim's won a medal, too, for doin' somethin' brave at Bully Court." Play on," growls Begg. "It's up to you." Then I reneges and trumps me partner's ace, and Poole gets sudden murder in his face. "I'm sick of this here game," he grunts. "It's tame." "Righto," I chips. "Suppose we toss it in." Begg don't say nothin', so we sling the game. On my wife's face I twigs a tiny grin. "Finished?" she says, surprised. "Well, perhaps it's right. It looks to me like hearts was trumps tonight." And so they was, and say the game was grand. 2 hours we sat while that old mother told about her Jim, his letter in her hand, and on her face a glowin' look that rolled the miles all up that lie 'twixt France and here, and found her son and brought him very near. A game of bridge it was, with hearts for trumps. We was the dummies sittin' silent there. I knew the men like me was feelin' chumps, foolin' with cards while this was in the air. It took Doreen to shove us in our place, and Mother held the lot right from the ace. She told us how he said he'd writ before, and how the letters must have gone astray, and how the stern old father still was sore, but looked like he'd be softenin' day be day. How pride in Jim peeps out behind his frown, and how the old fool hopes to hide it down. I knew, she says, I never doubted Jim, but what could any mother say or do when pryin' folks asked what become of him, but drop her eyes and say she never knew? Now I can lift me head to that sly glance and say Jim's fightin' with the rest in France. And when she goes, us four we don't require no gossiping to keep us in employ. Old Poole sits staring hard into the fire. I guess that he was thinking of his boy, who's been right in it from the very start, and Poole was thinking of a father's part. And then he speaks, this war has turned us hard. Suppose 4 years ago you said to me that I'd sit heedless staring at a card while that old mother told, "Good Lord," says he, "it takes the women for to put us wise to playin' games in wartime," and he sighs. And here Doreen sets out to put him right. "There's games and games," she says, "when women starts a hand at bridge like she has played tonight. It's nature teachin' 'em to make it arts. The other suits are yours," she says, "but then that's as it should be, seein' you are men." "Maybe," says Poole, and both gets up to go. I'll stand beside the door when they are gone, watchin' their lanterns swingin' to and fro, and hears Begg's voice as they go trudgin' on. "If you had led that queen we might have made—" "Rubbish!" shouts Poole. "You mucked it with your spade."
Chapter 3 of Digger Smith by C.J. Dennis. Chapter 3. Dad.
I've knowed old Flood this last 5 year or more. I knew him when his Sid went to the war. A proud old man he was, but I've watched him and seen his look when people spoke of Jim. As sour a look as most coves want to see. It made me glad that this here Jim weren't me. I sized up Flood the first day that we met. Stubborn as blazes when his mind is set. Old-fashioned in his looks and in his ways. Believin' it is honesty that pays. And still dead set, in spite of bumps he's got, to keep on honest if it pays or not. Poor old Dad Flood, he is too old to fight. By close I'm 30 year, but if I'm right about his doin's and about his grit, he's done a fair bit over his fair bit. They are too old to fight, but all the same, his kind's quite young enough to play the game. I've heard it called, this war, and it's the truth. I've heard it called the sacrifice of youth, and all this land has recognised it too, and gives the boys the praises that is due. I've heard the cheers for every fightin' lad, but up to now I ain't heard none for Dad. Old Flood and all his kind throughout the land, they ain't been heralded with no brass band, or been much thought about, but take my tip, the war has found 'em with a stiffened lip, humpin' the load they thought they'd dropped for good, crackin' real hearty and just sawin' wood. Dad Flood, his back is bent, his strength is gone. He's done his bit before this war came on. At 65 he thought his work was done. He gave the farmin' over to his son. and just sat back in peace with his old wife to spend content the evening of his life. Then come the war, and when Sid hesitates between the old folk and his fightin' mates, the old man goes outside and grabs a hoe. Says he, you want to, and you ought to go. What's stoppin' you? He straightens his old frame. Ain't I farmed long enough to know the game? There weren't no more to say, and Sid went west into the sunset with old Aussie's best. But no one ever heard no groans from Dad, though all his pride and hope was in that lad. He showed no sign except to grow more grim. His son was gone, and it was up to him. One day last month when I was down at Floods, I seen him struggling with a bag of spuds. "Look here," I says, "you let me spell you, Dad. You humpin' loads like that's a bit too bad." He gives a grunt that's more than half a groan. "What's up?" he snaps. "Got no work of your own?" That's him, but I've been tippin' that the pace would tell, and when his wife comes to our place and says that Dad is ill and took to bed, flat out with work, though that ain't what she said, I ain't surprised and tells her when I'm through I'll come across and see what I can do. I went across and I come back again. Strike me, it's no use reasonin' with some men. Stubborn old cows. I'm sick of them old fools. The way he yells, "Keep your hands off me tools!" You'd think I was a thief, his missus said. I'd better slope or he'd be out of bed. He heard us talkin' through the open door. "Who's that?" he croaks, although he tries to roar. And when his wife explains it's only me, to help a bit, "I want no charity," he barks, "I'll do me work myself, yeah." And then he gets so snarky that I clear. But he'll do me. I like the old boy's nerve. We don't do nothin' that he don't deserve. But me and Peter Begg and old man Poole, we fairly has our work cut out to fool the sly old fox when we sneaks down each day and works a while to keep things under way. We digs a bit and ploughs a bit and chops the wood and does the needful to his crops. We does it soft, and when he hears a row, his missus tells him it's the dog or cow. He says that it's queer noises for a pup, and there'll be ructions when old Flood gets up. It ain't all overwork that's laid him out. Old pride in him is fightin' hard with doubt. Today his wife says somethin' strange in him, for in his sleep sometimes he calls for Jim. It's 6 long years, she says, and stops to shake her head, but he don't mention him awake. Dad Flood, I thought him just a stiff-necked fool before the war, but as I says to Poole, this war has tested more than fightin' men. But say he isn't holy terror when friends try to help him earn a bite and sup. Oh, there'll be hell to pay when he gets up.
Chapter 4 of Digger Smith by C.J. Dennis. Chapter 4. Digger Smith.
He calls me Digger, that's how he begins. He says he's only half a man, and grins. Judged by his nerve, I'd say he was worth 2 of me and you. Then he digs half a fag out of his vest, borrows me matches, and I gives him best. The first I'd heard about it, Poole told me. "There is a bloke called Smith at Floods," says he. "Come there this mornin', says he's come to stay, and won't go way. Says he was sent there by a pal named Flood, and talks a contract sealed with Flanders mud. No matter what they say, he only grins. Says Poole he's rather wobbly on his pins. Seems like a soldier bloke, and Peter Begg, he says one leg. Works by machinery, but I don't know. I only know he's there, and he won't go. He grins, says Pearl, at everything they say. Dad Flood has nearly had a fit today. He's cursed and ordered him clean off the place. But this cove's face just goes on grinning, and he says quite calm, he's come to do a bit around the farm. The tale don't sound too good to me at all. If he's a crook, I says, he wants a fall. Maybe he's dilly. I'll go down and see. He'll grin at me when I have done if he needs dealin' with. So I goes down to interview this Smith. He had a fork out in the tater patch. Says he, "Why, hello, Digger, got a match?" "Digger," I says, "why, you ain't Digger here. You'd better clear. You ought to know that you can't dig them spuds. They don't belong to you. They're old man Flood's." "Can't I?" he grins. "I'll do the best I can, considerin' I'm only half a man. Give us a light. I can't get none from Flood, and mine is dud." I parts, and he stands grinnin' at me still, and then he says, "Have you forgot me, Bill?" I looks, and seen a tough bloke, short and thin. Then, Lord, I recommembers that old grin. "It's little Smith," I yells, "a Collingwood. Lad, this is good. Last time I seen you, you and Ginger Mick was owlin' rags out on your final kick." "You're onto it," he says. Next day we sailed. Now half of me's back home and half they nailed. And Mick, oh well, Fritz took me down a peg. He waves his leg. "It ain't too bad," he says with his old smile, "but when I starts to dig, it cramps me style." But I ain't grouchin', it was worth the fun. We had some picnic stoushing, brother Un. The only fight I've had that some John Op don't come and stop. They pulled me leg a treat, but all the same, there's nothin' over here to beat the game. And now he says I'm here to do a job I promised, if it was me luck, to lob back home before me mate, he says, and then he grins again. "As clear as mud," I says, "but I can't work. Me brain's to hold your pace, so what's the lurk?" So then he puts me wise. It seems that him and this here Flood, I tips it must be Jim, was cobbers up in France, and things occurred. I got his word. Things did occur up there, but anyway, seems Flood done something good for him one day. Then Smithy promised if he came back home before his cobber or the flamin' foam, he'd see the old folks here, and he agreed. If there was need, he'd stay and do a bit around the farm, so long as he had one sound dinkum arm. "So here I am," he says, and grins again. "A promise is a promise 'mongst us men." Says I, "You come along up to the house. Old Dad won't rouse. When once he's got your strength, and as for Ma, she'll kiss you when she finds out who you are." So we goes up and finds 'em both fair dazed about this little Smith. They think he's crazed. I tells the tale in words they understand. Then it was grand to see Dad grab Smith's hand and pump it good, and Ma, she kissed him like I said she would. Ma says he must be starved, and right away the kettle's on, she's busy with a tray. And when I left this digger Smith, he looked like he was booked for keeps, with tea and bread and beef inside. "Our little Willie's home," he grins, and dried.
Chapter 5 of Digger Smith by C.J. Dennis. West.
"I've seen so much of dirt and grime, I'm mad to have things clean. I've seen so much of death," he said, "so many cobbers lyin' dead, you won't know what I mean. But, lad, I've had so much of strife, I want things straightened in me life. "I've seen so much of 'ate," he said, "mad 'ate and silly rage. I'm yearnin' for clear thoughts," said he. "Kindness and love seem good to me. I want a new white page to start all over, clean and good, and live me life as real men should." We're sittin' talkin' by the fence, the sun's just goin' down, paintin' the sky all gold and pink, said he, "when it's like that, I think." And then he stops to frown. Said he, "I think when it's just so, of God or somethin', I dunno." "I ain't seen much of God," said he, "not here nor over there, but partly what I've seen and read, and partly what the Padre said, it gets me when I stare. Out west, when it's like that is now, there must be somethin' else, somehow." "I've thought a lot," said Digger Smith, "out there I've thought a lot. I've thought of death and all the rest, and of me mates, good mates gone west, and it ain't much I've got. But things get movin' in me head when I look over there," he said. "He's got me beat as little Smith. I knew him years ago. I knew him as a real tough boy who roughed it up with holy joy. But now, well, I don't know. And when I ask Ma Flood, she sighs and says he's got the Anzac eyes. She says he's got them soldier's eyes that make her own eyes wet, and we must give him wholesome food and lead his thoughts to somethin' good, and never let him fret. But he ain't frettin', seems to me, more puzzled, far as I can see." The clouds above the hill was tore apart until somehow it seemed like some big shinin' gate. Said he, "Why, lad, I'll tell you straight, I feel like startin' now, and walkin' on and through dead game, and ain't it so to you?" "I've seen enough of pain," he said, "and cursin', killin' hordes. I ain't the man to smooge with God to get to heaven on the nod, or howl hymns for rewards. But this believin', why, oh, 'struth, this never hit me in me youth. They talk of love 'twixt men," said he, "that sounds dead crook to you. But lately I have come to see—" "Hold on," I said, "it seems to me there's love of women too. And you?" He turns away his head. "I'm only half a man," he said. "I've seen so much of death," said he, "me mind is in a whirl. I've had so many thoughts of late," said I. "Now tell me straight, own up, ain't there a girl?" Said he, "I've done the best I can. What does she want with half a man?" It weren't no use, he wouldn't talk of nothin' but that sky. Said he, "Now, dinkum, talkin' square, when you get gazin' over there, don't you half want to cry? I wouldn't be surprised to see an angel comin' out," said he. "Gone west," said Digger Smith. "Oh, lad, I've seen 'em goin' west, and often wonder when I look if they have had it dealt 'em crook, or if they've got the rest they earned twice over by the spell they spent down in that dinkum-hell." The gold was creepin' up, the sun was half behind the range. It don't seem strange a man should cry to see that glory in the sky. To me it don't seem strange. "Digger," said he, "look at it now. There must be somethin' else, somehow."
Chapter 6 of Digger Smith by C.J. Dennis. Over the Fence.
"'Tain't my idea of argument to call a man a fool, and I ain't lookin' round for bricks to heave at old man Poole. But when he gets disputin' he's inclined to lose his head. It ain't so much his choice of words as how the words is said. He's such a coot for takin' sides, as I says to Doreen. Says she, 'How can he, by himself?' whatever that may mean. My wife says little things sometimes that nearly get me riled. I knew she meant more than she said by that soft way she smiled. Today when I was arrowing, Poole come down to the fence to get the loan of my long spade, and uses that pretence to have a bit of friendly talk, and one word leads to more, and is the way with old man Poole, as I've remarked before. The spade reminds him how he done some diggin' in his day, and diggin' brings the talk to earth, and earth leads on to clay. Then clay quite natural reminds a thinkin' bloke of bricks, and mortar brings up mud, and then, of course, it's politics. Now, Poole sticks by his party, and I don't deny he's right, but when he starts abusin' mine, he's lookin' for a fight. So I delivers good home truths about his crowd, then Poole wags his old beard across the fence and tells me I'm a fool. Now that's the dizzy limit, so I lays aside the reins and starts to prove he's storin' mud where most blokes keeps their brains. He decorates his answers and we're goin' it ding-dong, when this returned bloke, Digger Smith, comes saunterin' along. Poole's gripped the fence as though he means to tear the rails in two, and eyes me waggin' finger like he wants to have a chew. Then Digger Smith he grins at Poole, and then he looks at me, and says quite soft and friendly like, "Winnin' the war?" says he. Now Poole deserves it, and I'm pleased the lad give him that jolt. He goes fair mad in argument when once he gets a holt. "You make me sad," says Digger Smith, "the both of you," says he. "The both of us? Gawstruth," says I, "you ain't includin' me." "Well, it takes two to make a row," says little Digger Smith. "A bloke can't argue less he has a bloke to argue with. I've come home from a dinkum scrap to find this land alight is chasin' its own tail around and callin' it a fight. We've seen a thing or two, us blokes who've fought on many fronts, and we've had time to think a bit between the fightin' stunts. We've seen big things and thought big things, and all the silly fuss that used to get us rattled once seems very small to us. And when a bloke's fought for a land and gets laid on the shelf, it pains him to come home and find it scrappin' with itself. And scrappin' all for nothin', and for things that look so small. To us who've been in bigger things, they don't seem real at all. Perhaps we've had some skite knocked out, and perhaps we see more clear, but seems to us there's plenty cleanin' up to do round here. We've learnt a little thing or two, and we have unlearnt heaps, and silly partisans with us is counted out for keeps. This takin' sides just for the sake of takin' sides, oh, struth! I used to do them things one time, back in me foolish youth. Out there, when I remembered things, I've kicked meself real good. In football days I barracked once red hot for Collingwood. I didn't want to see a game nor see no justice done. It never mattered what occurred as long as my side won. The other side was narks and cows and rotters to a man, but mine was all real bonzer chaps. I was a partisan. It might sound like swelled Ed, says Smith, but show me if you can. Old Ard, says Poole, just tell me this, what is a partisan? Then Digger Smith starts to explain, Poole interrupts straight out, and I wades in to give me views and has to nearly shout. We battles on for one good hour, my team sleeps where it stands, and Poole has tossed the spade away to talk with both his hands, and Smith has dropped the maul he had. Then I looks round to see Doreen quite close. She smiles at us. "Winnin' the war?" says she. Chapter 7 of Digger Smith, A Digger's Tale.
My oath, the Duchess says, you'd not expect such things as that. You don't mean kangaroos? Go on, she says, or words to that effect. It's hard to imitate the speech they use. I tells her straight I drives 'em four in hand, 'ome in my land. You hear a lot, says little Digger Smith, about how English swells is so stand off. Don't you believe it, it's a silly myth. I've been real cobbers with the British toff, when I'm on leave, for Blighty liked our crowd and done us proud. Us Aussies was the goods in London town. When I was there, if they'd just twigged your hat, the dukes would ask you, could you keep one down? And earls would hang out welcome on the mat, and sling you invites to their stately halls for fancy balls. This Duchess, I ain't quite sure of her rank. She might have been a peeress, I dunno. I meets her husband first, he owns a bank. I heard, and half a dozen mints or so. A dinkum toff, he says, come home with me and have some tea. That's how I meet this Duchess, what's her name? Or Countess, never mind her moniker. I ain't no hand at this here title game, and right away I was real pals with her. "Now tell me all about your home," says she, and smiles at me. That knocks me out. I know it ain't no good, paintin' word pictures of the things I'd done, out home here barracking for Collingwood, or puntin' on the flat at Flemington. I know this Baroness of what you call wants somethin' tall. I thinks real hard, and then I lets it go. I tells her out at Richmond on me run, a little place of 10 square mile or so, I'm breedin' boomerangs, which is real fun, when I ain't troubled by the wild John Ops that eats me crops. I talks about the wondrous Boshter bird that builds her nest up in the cobber tree, and hatches out her young on May the 3rd, strict to the minute, just at 3:30. Her eyes get big, she says, "Can it be true?" Her eyes was blue. And then I speaks of sport and tells her how, in huntin' our wild wowsers, we employ large packs of barrackers, and how their row wakes echoes in the forests of Fitzroy, where lurks the deadly shikka snake whose breath is certain death. I'm goin' on to talk of kangaroos, and how I used to drive 'em four in hand. "What," says the Marchioness, "them things in zoos that hops about, I've seen 'em in the Strand, in double harness, but I ain't seen four. Tell me some more." I balks a bit at that, and she says, "Well, there ain't no cause at all for you to feel modest about the things you have to tell, and what you say sounds wonderfully real. Your talk," and here I seen her eyelids flick, "makes me homesick." "I recollect," she says, "now let me see, in Gippsland long ago, when I was young, I had a little pet corroboree. I sits up in me chair like I was stung. On its hind legs," she says, "it used to stand, fed from me hand." Of course I threw me alley in right there. This princess was a dinkum Aussie girl. I can't do nothin' else but sit and stare, thinkin' so rapid that me hair roots curl. But her, she says, I ain't heard talk so good since my childhood. "I wish," says she, "I could be back again, beneath the wattle and that great blue sky. It's like a breath of home to meet you men. You done real good," she says, "don't you be shy. When you're in Blighty once again," says she, "come and see me." I don't see her no more 'cause I stopped one, but 'fore I sails I gets a billy-do, which says, "Give my love to the dear old sun, and take an exile's blessin' home with you." And if you have some boomerangs to spare, save me a pair. I'd like to see 'em play about, she wrote, out on me lawn and stroke their pretty fur. God bless you, boy. And then she ends her note, "You dinkum cobber," and her moniker. A sport, you bet. She's married to an earl, an Aussie girl.
Chapter 8 of Digger Smith by C.J. Dennis. Jim's Girl. "Who is that girl," says Digger Smith, "that never seems to bother with no blokes, the bint with curly hair? I've often seen her over there, talking to Mrs. Flood, and she seems like a real ripe peach to me. Not that I'm askin'," here his eyes goes sort of swivelly and he sighs, "not that I'm askin' with ideas of love and marriage, have no fears. I've chucked the matrimony plan," he says, "I'm only half a man." This Digger Smith has fairly got me rampin' with his half-man rot. He has a timber leg, it's true, but he can do the work of two. Besides, the things he's done out there makes him one man and some to spare. I knew his question was just kid. He'd met this girl, I know he did. He knew Jim Flood, and her was booked for double when the 'un was cooked. But seein' her, it used to start him thinkin' of another tart. "Oh, her," says I, "she is a pearl. I've heard she used to be Jim's girl, but she was just a child when Jim got out. She has forgotten him." I knows just what was in his mind, and says, "Wade in if you're inclined." He give me such a nasty look, I thought he meant to answer crook. "But I ain't out for jokes," says he. "You needn't sling that stuff to me. I only was just thinkin' p'raps there's some," he says, "that sticks to chaps. Some girls," says he, "keeps true to chaps, and wed 'em when they're done with scraps, and come home whole. You don't expect no tart to tie up with a wreck. Besides," he says, "well, anyhow, that girl's all right. I know it now." "I knows," says Smith, "I got it right. Jim used to talk to me at night about a little girl he tracked. Her name is Flo. Ain't that a fact? That's her. I know she writes to him each mail. She ain't forgotten Jim. I'd like to swap me luck for Jim's if he comes home with all his limbs, and if he don't, well, I don't know. I've taken notice of this Flo, and wonder if," he stares at me, "if there is more like her," says he. Now, Digger Smith has learned a lot out fightin' there, but he ain't got the cunning for to hide his art. He's too damn honest for a start. His mind's dead simple to a friend. I've read him through from end to end. I've learned from things he hasn't said just what's been runnin' in his head. I know there is a girl somewhere, someone who had the art to care for him when he went to the war. I know all that, and somethin' more. I know that since he came back here he hasn't seen that girl for fear she'd turn him down, give him the bird, and hand him out the frozen word, because he's left a leg in France, and he's afraid to take a chance. Well, not afraid, perhaps, but shook. It's just the form his nerves have took. Now he's been watchin' Flo and seen her style and how she's always keen for news of Jim, then he starts out to hope and hesitate and doubt. He wonders if his own girl spoke just this same way about her bloke. He wonders if in his girl's eyes the same look came, and then he sighs and dulls his senses with the dope that half a man ain't got no hope. He makes me tired, but all the same I tries to work a little game "Look here," I says, "about this flow. Jim mightn't come back home, you know. You have a fly, you're sure to score. Besides, all's fair in love and war." "Sling that," he says, but I goes on. "Old Jim won't blame you when she's gone. He knows, the same as me and you, these silly tarts they can't keep true. I piles it on until I've got him where I want him, jumpin' hot." And then he says, "Here, sling that talk. I might be groggy in me walk, but if you say them things to me, I'm man enough to crack you, see?" "Righto," says I. "That was me plan. Now what about this half a man?" He stares at me and then says slow, "What is your game? What do you know?" "Nothin'," I tells him, "only this. When there's a waitin' tart to kiss, you're only half a man, but when there's blokes to fight, you're 20 men." "What tart?" he asks. "You mean this flow?" "Perhaps not," I says. "You ought to know." I waits to let me words sink in, and then he beats me with that grin. "Matchmakin', Bill?" he laughs. "Oh, hell! You take up knittin' for a spell."
Chapter 9 of Digger Smith by C.J. Dennis. The Boys Out There.
"Why do they do it? I dunno," says Digger Smith. "You got me beat. Some of the yarns you hear is true, and some is rather humpty-doo, and some is indiscreet. But them that don't get to the crowd, them is the ones would make you proud." With Digger Smith and other blokes who have returned, it's much the same. They talk of what they've seen and done when they've been out to have their fun, but no word of the game. On fights and all the tale of blood, their talk, as they remark, is dud. It's so with soldiers, I have heard, all times, the things that they have done. War mad, with blood before their eyes, and in their ears wild fightin' cries, they ever after shun. Perhaps they forget, or find it well, not to recall too much of hell. And when they won't loose up their talk, it's hard for us to understand how all those boys we used to know, old Billo, Jim and Tom and Joe, done things to beat the band. We knew they'd fight, but they've became head ringers at the fightin' game. Well, what I've heard from Digger Smith and other soldier blokes like him, I've put together bit by bit and chewed a long time over it, and now I've got a dim, an hazy notion in me head why they is battlers born and bred. What did they know of war first off? When they joined up, what did I know? When I was tossed out on me neck as if I was a shattered wreck, the time I'd tried to go. Flat feet! Me feet as length and breadth, enough to kick an 'un to death. They don't know nothin', bein' reared out here where war has never spread, a land by bloodless conquest won, as some son of a writin' gun says in a book I read. They don't know nix but what they're told at school, and that sticks till they're old. You've got to take the kid at school, gettin' his history lesson learned, them tales of Nelson and of Drake, of Wellington and fightin' Blake, his little heart has burned, to get right out and have a go and sock it into some base foe. Nothin' but glory fills his mind, the British charge is somethin' grand, the soldier that he reads about don't have no time for fear and doubt, he's the heroic brand. So when that boy gets in the game, he just wades in and does the same. Not bein' old hands at the stunt, they simply do as they are told, but bein' Aussies, spare me days, they never thinks of other ways but does it brave and bold. That's half, and for the other part, you gotta go back to the start. You've gotta go right back to Dad, to Grandad and the pioneers who packed up all their bag of tricks and come out here in '56 and battled through the years. Our granddads and their women too, that had the grit to face the new. It's that old stock, and more than that, it's Bill and Jim and every son gettin' 3 good meat meals a day and heaps of chance to go and play out in the bonza sun. It's partly that, but don't forget, when it's all said, there's something yet. There's something yet, and there I'm beat. Crowds of these lads I've known, but then they have got something from this war, something they never had before, that makes 'em better men. Better, there's no word I can get to name it right. There's something yet. We hear a lot about reward, we praise and sling the cheers about, but there was debts we can't repay piled up on us one single day when that first list come out. There ain't no way to pay that debt. Do what we can. There's something yet. Chapter 10 of Digger Smith by C.J. Dennis. 'Arf a Man. I'll wash me hands of him, I tells 'em straight. You women can do what you dash well like. I leave this 'arf a man to his own fate. I've done me bit, and now I'm gone on strike. Do what you please, but don't ask help from me. He's give me nerves, so now I'll let him be. Doreen and old Ma Flood has got a scheme. They've been conspiring for a week or more about this Digger Smith, and now they dream they've got his future waitin' in cool store to hand him out and fix him up for life. But they've got Buckleys, as I tells me wife. I've seen 'em whisperin' up in our room. Now they wants me to join in the debate. But nix, I tells 'em, I ain't in the boom. And Digger Smith ain't risin' to me bait. He's far too fly a fish for me to catch, and 2 designin' women ain't his match. I puts me foot down firm and tells 'em no. Their silly plan's a thing I wouldn't touch. And then me wife, for 1/2 an hour or so, talks to me confident of nothin' much. Then, 'fore I know it, I am all red hot into the scheme and leader of the plot. 'Twas Ma Flood starts it. She got hold of him. You know the way they have with poor weak men. She drops a tear or 2 concernin' Jim, tells him what women have to bear, and then she got him talkin' like a woman can. He never would have squeaked to any man. She leads him on, it's crook the way they scheme, to talk about this girl he's left behind. Not that she's pryin', why, she wouldn't dream. But speakin' of it might just ease his mind. Then, 'fore he knows, he's told, to his surprise, name and address and colour of her eyes. And then she's off here plottin' with Doreen, bustin' a confidence, I tells 'em flat. But all me roustin' leaves 'em both serene. Women don't see a little thing like that. And I ain't cooled off yet before they've got me workin' for 'em in this crooked plot. Next day Ma Flood, she takes her Sunday dress and her best little bonnet up to town. Her game's to see the girl at this address and word her in regard to comin' down. To take Smith by surprise, my part's to fix a meetin' so there won't be any mix. I tips somehow that girl won't hesitate. She don't. She comes right back with Ma next day, all of a fluster when I seen her state. I thinks I'd best see Digger straight away, 'cause if I don't he's bound to hear the row. With her, where is he? Can't I see him now? I finds him in the paddock down at floods. I ums and ahs a bit about the crops. He don't say nothin', goes on baggin' spuds. "How would you like?" I says to him, and stops. "How would it be?" He stands and looks at me. "Now what the hell's got into you?" says he. That don't restore me confidence a bit. The drama isn't goin' as I tipped. I coughs and makes another shot at it, while he looks at me like he thinks I'm dipped. "Well, just suppose," I says, and then I turn and see her standin' there among the fern. She don't want no preliminaries, this tart. She's broke away before they rung the bell. She's beat the gun and got a flyin' start. Smith makes a funny noise, and I says, "Hell," because I tumbles that I'm out of place. But as I went, I caught sight of her face. That's all I want to know, and as I ran, I hears her cry, "My man, man and a half! Don't fool me with your talk of half a man." And then I hears old Digger start to laugh. It was a funny laugh, so help me Bob. Fair in the middle of it come a sob. I don't see Digger till the other night. "Well, half a man," I says, "how goes it now?" "Yes, half a man," says he, "you got it right. I can't change that alone, not anyhow. But she is mendin' things," he starts to laugh. "Some day," he says, "she'll be the better half."
Chapter 11 of Digger Smith by C.J. Dennis. Sawing Wood.
I wondered what was doin' first I seen old Mrs. Flood wave signals to Doreen. I'm in the paddock slashing down some ferns. She's coming up the road, and if she turns an handspring I won't be surprised a bit, the way she's capering and going it. She yells out some remark when she gets near, which I don't catch, I'm too far off to hear. And then Doreen comes prancin' to our door, and Mrs. Flood she sprints and yells some more. My wife runs to the gate and waves her arms, but I lays low, I'm used to these alarms. A married bloke in time, he learns a bit, and he ain't over keen to throw a fit each time the women calls the fire reel out. It's just a trifle he'll know all about. When things get normal, that's a point I learn. So I saws wood and keeps on cuttin' fern. At least I cut a few, I gotta give real facts and own I was inquisitive. And these 'ere fireworks gets me fair perplexed. I watch the 'ouse to see what happens next. But nothin's doin', they just goes on in, and leaves me wonderin' what's caused the din. I stands it for a full 1/2 hour or more, then gets dead sick of starin' at the door. I goes down to the 'ouse and 'unts about to find some bacca, which, I 'ave no doubt, is in me trousers pocket all the while. When I goes in, the talk stops and they smile. I says I've lost me smoke and search a bit, and asks Doreen what has become of it, and turns the mantel shelf all upside down and looks inside the teapot with a frown. Then gives it up and owns I'd like a drink, when Mrs. Flood says, "Bill, what do you think?" Now ain't that like a woman, spare me days? I'll never get resigned to all their ways. When they has news to tell they smile and wink, and bottle it and ask you what you think. It's just a silly game of theirs, and so I gives the countersign. What? I dunno. "Then guess," she says. Well, I'm a patient bloke, so I sits down and starts to cut a smoke. To play this game you've got to persevere. "Couldn't," I says, "if I guessed for a year." Then lights me pipe and waits for her to speak. At last she says, "Jim's comin' back next week." "Go on," says I, and puffs away a while, quite unconcerned, but for to see her smile was just a treat. Her eyes were shinin' bright, and she'd growed 10 years younger in a night. "Just 'ere, Doreen," she says to me, "Good Lord, what do you want 2 plugs o' 'bacca for?" I takes me pipe out of me mouth and stares, and stammers, "Must 'a' found a piece somewheres." But by the way she smiles so extra sweet, I know she twigs me game, and I am beat. "Fancy," she says, "you're absent-minded, dear. Sure there was nothin' else you wanted 'ere?" "Nothin'," I says, and feels a first prize fool, and goes outside and grabs the nearest tool. It was the crosscut, so I works like mad to keep me self-respect from goin' bad. This game, I tells meself, will do you good. You ain't proficient yet at sawin' wood. Chapter 12 of Digger Smith by C.J. Dennis. Jim. "Now be the oaky fly," says Peter Begg. "Suppose he comes home with a wooden leg? Suppose he isn't fit to dance at all? Then ain't we hasty fixin' up this ball? A little tournament at bridge is my idea," says Peter, be the oaky fly. Old Peter Begg is gettin' on in years. He owns a real good farm, and all he fears is that some girl will land him by and by and share it with him, be the oaky fly. That's his pet swear word, and I dunno what he's meanin', but he uses it a lot. "Dancin'," growls Begg. "We're fixin' up the 'all with bits of green stuff for a little ball to welcome Jim, who's comin' home next day. We're hangin' flags around to make things gay, and shiftin' chairs and candle greasin' floors, as is our way when blokes comes home from wars." "A little game of bridge," says Peter Begg, "would be more decent like, and p'raps a keg o' somethin' if the 'ero's feelin' dry. But this 'ere dancin', be the oaky fly, these selfish women never thinks at all about the guest, they only wants the ball." "Now, cards," says Begg, "amuses every one, and then our soldier guest could have his fun if he'd lost both his legs. It makes me sick. 'Ere, don't you spread that candle grease too thick. You're wastin' it, and us men has to buy. Enough for nonsense, be the oaky fly." Begg, he ain't never keen on wastin' much. "Peter," I says, "it's you that needs a crutch. Why don't you get a wife and settle down?" He looks real fierce and answers with a frown, "Do you think I am going to be rooked for half me tucker just to get it cooked?" I lets it go at that, and does me job. And when a little later on I lob along the 'omeward track down by Flood's gate, I meet old Digger Smith and stops to state me views about the weather and the war. He tells me Jim gets 'ere next day at 4. And as we talk I sees along the road a strange bloke humpin' some queer sort of load. I points him out to Smith and says, "Who's that? Looks like a soldier, don't he? Be's that?" "Stranger," says Digger, "be the cut of 'im. But trust a mother's eyes, it's Jim, my Jim!" "My Jim!" I hears, an' scootin' up the track comes Mrs. Flood with Flo close at her back. It was a race for lover an' for son. They finished neck an' neck, but mother won. For it was 'er that got the first good 'ug. I'm took so back I stands there like a mug. Then come Flo's turn, an' Jim an' Digger they shakes 'ands without no fancy grandstand play. You'd think they parted yesterday, them two, for all the wild 'eroics that they do. "You done it, lad," says Jim. "I knew you would." "You bet," says Smith, "but I'm all to the good." Then of a sudden all their tongues is loosed. They finds me there, and I am introduced. An' Jim tells 'ow it was he come to land so soon, while Mar an' Flo each 'olds an 'and. But just as sudden they all stop an' stare down to the 'ouse at Dad Flood standin' there. 'E's got 'is 'and up, shadin' off the sun. Then 'e starts up to them, but Dad don't run. 'E isn't 'owlin' for 'is lost boy's kiss. 'E's got 'is own sweet way in things like this. 'E wanders up an' stands an' looks at Jim. An' spare me days, that look was extra grim. I seen the mother pluckin' at 'er dress. I seen the girl's white face an' 'er distress. An' Digger Smith, 'e looks real queer to me. Grinnin' inside 'imself 'e seemed to be. At last Dad says, "Oh, 'e's a tough old gun." "Well, are you sorry now for what you done?" Jim gives a start, but answers with a grin, "Well, Dad, I 'ave been learnin' discipline. An' though I ain't quite sure what did occur way back," he's grinnin' worse, "I'm sorry, sir. It beats me that about those soldier blokes. They're always grinnin' like all things was jokes. P'raps Dad is gettin' dull in 'is old age, but 'e don't seem to see Jim's camouflage. P'raps 'e don't want to, for in his old eye I seen a twinkle as 'e gives reply. "Next week," 'e says, "we will begin to cart the taters. You can make another start." But then 'e grabs Jim's 'and. I seen the joy in mother's eyes. "Now, welcome 'ome, me boy," says Dad, an' then 'e adds, "You made me proud." That's all, an' 'e don't add it none too loud. Dad don't express 'is feelin's in a shout. It cost 'im somethin' to get that much out. We 'ad the dance, an' spite of all Beg's fears, Jim danced like 'e could keep it up for years. Mostly with Flo we don't let up till 3. An' then old Peter Beg, Doreen an' me, we walked together 'ome, an' on the way Doreen has quite a lot of things to say. "Did you see Flo?" says she. "Don't she look grand? That Jim's the luckiest in all the land. An' little Smith, that girl of 'is, I'm sure She'll bring 'im 'appiness that will endure." She hugs me arm, then says, "'Usband or wife, if it's the right one, is the wealth of life." I sneaks a look at Beg an' answers yes. "You're right, old girl, that's the real 'appiness. An' if ole lonely growlers was to know the worth of 'appy marriage 'ere below, they'd swap their bank books for a wife," says I. Says Peter Beg, "Well, be the oaky fly."
Chapter 13 of Digger Smith by C.J. Dennis. A Square Deal.
"Dreamin'," I says to Digger Smith, "buck up, old sport, and smile. Ain't there enough of joy today to drive the bogey man away and make real things worth while? A bloke would think, to see you stare, there's visions on the 'ill-tops there." "Dreamin'," says Digger Smith, "why not? and there is visions too. And when I get 'em sorted out and strafe that little bogey doubt, I'll start me life all new. Oh, I ain't crook, but packed in 'ere is thoughts enough to last a year. I'm thinkin' things, says Digger Smith, I'm thinkin' big and fine, of life and love and all the rest, and what is right and what is best, and how much will be mine. Not that I'm wantin' overmuch, some work, some play, and food and such. See 'ere, I says, you arter me, I've done some thinkin' too, and this 'ere land, for what you did, owes some few million solid quid to fightin' blokes like you. So don't be too damn modest, or you'll get less than you're lookin' for. Money, says Digger. Loot, says he. Oh, give that talk a rest. I'm sick of it. I didn't say that I was thinkin' all of pay, but what was right and best. And that ain't in the crazy game of grabbin' wealth and chasin' fame. Do you think us blokes over there, when things was goin' strong, was keepin' ledgers day be day and reckonin' what the crowd would pay? Pull off! You've got it wrong. Do you think all the blokes gone west wants great swank headstones on their chest? You chaps at home has small idea of what we think and feel. We done our bit and seen it through, and all that we are askin' you is just a fair square deal. We want this land we battled for to settle up, and somethin' more. We want the land we battled for to be a land worthwhile. We're sick of greed and hate and strife and all the mess that's made of life. He stopped a bit to smile. I got these thoughts out there because we learnt what mateship really was. The hills behind the orchard trees was showin' misty blue. The evening light was growin' dim, and down I sat 'longside of him and done some dreamin' too. I'd dreams of war and what is paid by blokes that went and blokes that stayed. I'd dreams of honour and reward, and how to pay a debt, for partin' cash and buyin' farms and fittin' chaps with legs and arms ain't all, there's somethin' yet. There's still a solid balance due, and now it's up to me and you. There's men I know ain't yet woke up or recognise that debt, proud men who wouldn't take you down or owe their grocer 1/2 a crown. They ain't considered yet. There's somethin' owin' to the dead, and diggers live for more than bread. We learnt what mateship was, he says. Us diggers found the good that's hid away somewhere in chaps, and ain't searched for enough, perhaps, or prized or understood. But all this game of grab and greed and silly hate, why, where's the need? The hills behind the orchard trees just caught the setting sun. A bloke might easy think that there, way back behind the range somewhere, where streaks of sunlight run, there was a land swept clear of doubt, where men finds what they dreams about. Beauty, says Digger sudden like, and love and kindliness, the chance to live a clean straight life, a dinkum deal for kids and wife, a man needs nothin' less. Maybe they'll get it when I go to push up daisies, I dunno. Dreamin', says Digger Smith, why not? There's visions on the hill. Then I gets up and steals away and leaves him with the dyin' day, dreamin' and doubtin' still. Cobber, it's up to me and you to see that half his dream comes true. The End. End of Digger Smith by C.J. Dennis.